Okay, so welcome back to part two of using the UbD to plan your lesson. In the previous video, we gathered our necessary documents. We gathered the yearly glance or a YAG. We located that in the Schoology platform. We gathered our instructional planning or pacing guide, the IPG, and two was also located in Schoology. Then we grabbed the snapshot, which is my preferred document. We found that in Lead Forward. Remember, this is a good amount of information, but it's not too little like the YAG or too much like the IPG. It's just right. It's like Goldilocks. If you're in a tested area, it's always good to have Lead Forward accessible so that you can refer to the IQ questions or the released EOC questions that are available in Lead Forward. Since we're using the UbD as a template for our lesson plan, we're going to grab that. We've grabbed that. And because we're at the high school has agreed upon placing minutes for meetings in our 2019-20 collaborative planning agenda. One thing I forgot to make mention, and this is a very important document, I do not understand why I forgot it, but I forgot to include the pacing calendar. At the beginning of the school year, preferably before the school even starts, your collaborative team should sit down with the YAG and the instructional planning guide, and you look at the suggested amount of days that they're suggesting in the IPG for a particular concept, and then put it on a calendar. Make it real. So, for example, I have an example of biology's pacing calendar. And what it does is it showcases, it gives you exactly, you'll know day to day if instruction starts on the 21st, okay, these are the things that we're covering on the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, where you break it down and designate an amount of time for each one of the concepts that you have to cover. Now, this is a very important document, and this should be done as a team. It should not be done by one individual unless you shouldn't be done by one individual. Now, you need to make sure that you keep track of what you do, because you want to always stay in alignment with your teammates. Sometimes you may be behind. Oftentimes you may fall behind, but you want to keep that calendar in mind so that you can make sure that you stay in alignment with everybody else. Okay, so we have a number of documents, and what we're going to do is we're going to utilize this UbD and create a lesson. So here's how the UbD looks. The UbD is situated with different stages. You got stage 1, you have stage 2, and stage 3 is where you actually put your day-to-day instruction with, and I'll show you that later. So if you look at this initially, it looks very overwhelming. It's a lot of information. It does not help that they put the little blue notes about trying to explain what it means in here. So let's break it down a little bit easier. So when I look at this, I try to think about a way to make sense of this information. So right here where it says establish goals, what I would do is I would identify which TEKS I'm going to cover, and that's where I will put it at. Once I identify the TEKS, because everything is TEKS driven, so before I do anything else, I need to know specifically what the TEKS is. I need to know and write the entire phrase of the TEKS, unfiltered here. Then I want to go and I want to unpack the TEKS. So wherever these TEKS are, I'm going to unpack it by identifying key verbs, whatever the concept is, and then identifying the context of that particular TEKS. And then I want to take that and I want to break it down into some smaller explicit statements. So I'll put the unpacked here and I'll break it down over here. So I know it says students will know, and it says students will be skilled at, but that's where I will put those pieces at. Once I've unpacked the TEKS and I clearly know exactly what I need to instruct upon, I will go and I will identify the essential questions. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use an IPG. IPG gives you plenty of information, and one of the things it gives you a list of essential questions. I will just cut and paste those here. Find the ones that are applicable, that actually are to the utilizes that verb that's in your TEKS, and then paste it here. Once I identify those questions, I will put the actual answers to them over on this side. quite often we may put the questions, but we don't necessarily think about the answers and what we are expecting the students to, or how we're expecting the students to answer those questions. So this is a good way of beginning your scripting. So it's a form of scripting. It's not the elaborate thing, but these are the questions I plan on asking my class, and these are the responses I plan on receiving. I would like to ideally receive. So we've identified the TEKS, we've unpacked the TEKS, identifying the verbs, concept, and the context, broke it down into simpler, more explicit statements, went into the IPG and I identified the essential questions that align to these TEKS, and then answer them ourselves to establish an exemplar and begin scripting our lesson. Once I do that, I will go to products. I will figure out, okay, so this is what I need them to know. This is what I need them to know and do. And these are the things I want them to answer and what I want them to be able to say. Now I need to figure out, well, what kind of products, what kind of work can I give them, some deliverables where they can actually showcase what they know. So I started thinking of ways that I can check for understanding. What are the products that I can use to check for understanding? What are the formative assessments that I will embed it in my instruction, in my lessons? And I will place those here. Now, once I've done that, I figured out what we need to talk about, what we're discussing. I figure out these guiding and probing questions that I can get them to answer. And then I can I know I've identified what products I want them to produce. Now I can kind of extend it. I can go and extend it more. And I can go and talk about how this relates to the real world. So right here where it says transfer, this is where I will place how it relates to the real world, because none of this means anything we can't figure out how to make this relevant to the students. If they do not know how this applies to life, they're less likely to retain the information. They may know it enough for a test, if they know it enough for a test, but it means nothing to them and it doesn't stick. So you want to make it sticky by bringing some relevance into their life. Now, once I've identified that, I can go on to my favorite part, which is creation of a PBL. If I know where this concept is used in real life, I know what careers use it. I can give one example of a career that uses this particular concept. I am a hair away from what can be a stellar class, which is by creating a project-based learning assignment that allows them to extend their understanding and further supports their understanding. So they're applying skills to some real problem or real project. So identify your TEKS first, write them here. Unpack those TEKS. Identify your verbs, the concept, the context here. Break it down to explicit statements here. So you can make sure that you cover everything. You have to make sure you break it down. You can go into the IPG and find essential questions. Answer those essential questions. So you're scripting your exemplars here. Once you've done that, you can go back to the IPG. Let's just say you need some help on what are some examples that you can use for product or formative assessments. Go back to the IPG and find the information here, or you can create these yourselves. Find some kind of authentic work for them to actually utilize to showcase their understanding. Identify how it relates to real life. Create a PBO that links everything together. You do all of this before you start your lessons. This seems very exhaustive, seems very extensive, seems like a lot. But the beautiful thing about this, if I'm talking about a unit, this plan applies to multiple weeks. It's however long I'm going to be discussing this unit, and it also covers the entirety of this PBL. Now, if you notice on the sides, the left sides and the right sides, these are really these columns are for teachers and making notations. Now, I put the TEKS right here because I think that the TEKS needs to be put at the top in the forefront. We read from left to right, so it needs to be one of the first things that you see, because everything else is predicated off of the TEKS. But all the other things are for teacher notes. So any kind of notes that you want to make sure you put some notations here, which are discussed in a PLC. In your collaborative team meeting, you can put it right here. If this is a working document, so if this is you're going to use this document for a couple of weeks, once you get the first set of data, you should add your data here. You should identify which TEKS it covered and what the data was, what percentage of students did this, and how they fared on their common bell ringers and their common exit tickets, and whatever other data that you collected. Put that here, and that's an artifact. You can actually now use that data to kind of make adjustments and changes, or to use this as justification of why you're doing certain things. Any accommodations that you may have to make, because you're going to make accommodations for those who are in need, who have IEPs, 504s, GT, ELs, all kinds of different demographics. And you can write those notations to the side. That way that people can see that I am making accommodations for these students in this manner. Any kind of extra notes, anecdotal notes that you may want to notate, you can put like if you thinking of some ideas of what to do with this later on or next year, you can put it there. Evaluated criteria. These things is kind of open. You can kind of make changes as needed. And something like this, I would probably, if I'm using a rubric, I'll probably put the specifics on the rubric up here. And once again, data, anecdotal notes, PLC notes. So this is basically the nuts and bolts of the UbD. Remember, there are 3 stages. The first stage requires you to identify your TEKS, unpack your TEKS, identify those verbs, identify the context, identify the content and context, examine star release questions. So let me stop there and go back. When I unpack my TEKS right here, before I get to this essential questions, there's a step that I missed. If you have a star release question, if you have a teaching a content that is a star or ELC tested area, once you unpack that TEKS, you need to stop what you're doing and go to the release test. So you go to that lead forward. Go to resources, and at the top, go to IQ. And you put in those specific information. This is science, let's say biology. We did this in the last video. Go to student expectations, and I'll pick my SE, whatever it is. Let me just put 4B. And then I will select all the years that they offer, just because I want to see how they tested this particular TEKS every time they tested it, as far back as they can. So in this particular case, they did not, that's not in there. I don't know if Lead Forward is behind on. They did reconfigure their website, so I think maybe some of their TEKS haven't been, some of the stuff is not updated. So sorry about that. I shouldn't have just randomly chose something. I looked at 9A, so I'm going to choose 9A because I know there's something there for 9A. I've looked at that recently. So now I can look and see on the, let me pull something up real quick. I'm going to pull up the, snapshot. And I want to look at what 9A actually says. Here it says that 9A for biology, the students will compare the functions of different types of biomolecules, including carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. So they're expected to compare, that's my verb. And what are they comparing? The functions of different types of biomolecules. And what's the context? Dealing with carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Okay. Now, that's great. That's pretty good. But how does that look on a test? This is why the release test questions is very important, because now I can see exactly how they've been tested. So I'm just going to kind of glance through this real quick. So here's one question. Here's another one. Oh, there's a graphic. It actually shows the structure. And here's a chart. Oh, here is a, well, I guess it would be a table if you connected these things in table form. This is the second one that doesn't have any kind of visual. Oh, here goes another visual. Here goes another visual. This one doesn't have it. So it's 3 so far with no visual. 4 so far with no visual. 5, 6. Here's another visual. So what I've discovered is that 6 of the problems are all the problems they've done in the last few years Only 6 of them did not have a visual. So that means that when I construct my lessons and construct my questions, a good portion of the questions need to have, or the lesson needs to have some kind of graphic. I noticed that. And then I can go and I can look at the actual test question and see how they're asking them. When they say compare, well, how are they expecting them to compare them? I can read that and actually analyze it, break down the question. I can go over here and look and see how the students within the state of Texas fared on that particular question. The correct answer is marked with a star. I can see, 78% of them got it right. And this incorporates a process skill also, in addition to it being a readiness standard. And I look at each one of those things. This is another one. The second question has a processing standard. So both the first two have processing standard. Oh, there's another one with a processing standard. And there, nope. I was going to say another one. So far, 3 out of 4 of the questions not only had the had a regular SE, but it also tested a processing standard. So as I go and look at these questions, I can see how they ask them about this particular piece, how they're questioned. This is invaluable, and it's not a step that should be missed or should be skipped. The only people who are somewhat disadvantaged are the teachers who are not in a tested area, because what you would need to do is probably pull other common assessments that they've done, that they've been given previous years. Some of them you made them, some of them have been made by the district. So see if you can get a hold of some of the release questions to see how this particular teach is tested. That's a mouthful. Now, let's go down to the actual document. What I would do is I would go to Schoology and I'll download the UbD, and then I would actually place it in a Google document as a Google document. And the reason why is because I think that when you're working on this, everyone who is in the room needs to be in this document. It is not one person who is responsible for this. This is the lesson plan for the entire team. They can make modifications to their own, but when we're working, everyone needs to see it. Everyone needs to have access to it. Everyone needs to be present. And then all you have to do is just start typing, and add it in. And as people, as you go from one thing to the next, you just type the information. So we'll fill out stage 1. Remember, we'll identify the teaks right here. Then we'll go and we'll unpack the teaks down here. We'll identify the verb, the content, and the context. Then we'll break it down into simpler steps. And then once we finish that, if it's a tested area, we'll go back to lead forward and we'll pull up the questions just to see how they're going to be asked. Because if I can see how those questions look, now I can better pick the essential questions that will guide the students to being able to answer those questions on the ELC. It's very important. Do not miss that step. Once I identify the answers, the questions from the IPG, then I can go and answer those questions to the best of my ability. What I want to make sure I do is I write out exactly what I want them to actually say when they're answering the question. Will they always say it? No. That's why you're there, because you're going to keep probing them and you're going to try to get them to answer the question the way that you want them to answer it. So once you do that, you're going to go and identify some products, remember, or some formative assessments. Remember, you can go into the IPG. It has a lot of examples available to you. So do not, if somebody sat down and worked on that and they got paid for that, so make sure you utilize that, because it is a tool that is very helpful, and it should be helpful. Once you do that, now you can go back and you can relate it to real life. Put that information here. Where does this appear in real life? And then create your PBL and identify all the pieces of the PBL. It's a lot of information, but it is not meant to be done solo. So utilize your team. The last thing that you do is what we're used to seeing as a lesson plan. Stage 3 is your day-to-day. So I've already kind of outlined. I've used the UbD, which is the Understanding by Design, which is backwards planning. I've come up with the final product. This is what the teaks. This is my beginning. My final product is my end. And now I'm going to try to piece everything together and break it down so that I can make sure that the students are meeting that goal at the end. Everything I do is to make sure that they meet that goal. And that's where this comes into place. Now, if by chance this is going to take more than 1 week, you can always copy this and paste another week on there. In fact, I would suggest you do this. Don't try to do a different form every week if you're covering basically the same concept or the same unit. And then the way that it's situated here is all we're asking for is you to identify your lesson plan frame. So what are you planning on modeling? What are you planning on to modeling to the students or doing directly teaching to the students? What are you doing to introduce this or to introduce information? That's what you put right here or for I do. What we do is this is you guiding the students in doing something. Right here, you're doing a lot of it. You don't want to stay in this area too long. Now, what are you doing with the students? What are they actually having to do with your guidance? And after you identify that, what are you doing, having them do independently or within groups? Okay, collaboratively and or independently. I would say all of these need to be done in a day. I do, we do, you do, but the you do needs to be split up into something that they do with a partner or a group, but then something they do independently so that you can check for their understanding. If you had homework, you can put it right here. But that's pretty much all that you need to have in your lesson plan. Can you put more in here? Yes. Because you may hit a whole bunch of stuff. Like I always put an agenda in my lesson plan because that keeps me organized. So I may end up talking about add my bell ringer in there, which is not necessarily an I do, we do, or you do. Or I may add something else I have to review, which is not necessarily in this framed lesson. But I added in there because it helps me to stay organized. This, once you do it as a team, if you do your I do, we do, and you do as a team, you can always go back and modify it if you have some changes within your classroom. In fact, you need to make sure that everything is personalized. The stage 1 and stage 2 pretty much will be the same because you're planning as a team. You may have a few more products that here than somebody else because you just want to make sure you incorporate this product. But for the most part, all this other stuff is going to be the same. So make sure that once you guys have filled this out, that your parties, this is what's shared to your appraiser and your coach or coordinator. But each member needs to make a copy of this so that they can personalize it and then upload it to their Eduforia forethought. Hopefully this helps. I mean, it's extensive, but these are the every one of these things that's on here is of value. So please don't cheat and skip any sections because if you skip some of the sections, you'll see that some things may fall through the cracks. You want to make sure that you always know what the end looks like, and the end is predicated off of the text. So that's the beginning, and then is this in here, the meat of it that can sometimes get a little foggy also. So that's the ending of. Well, hold on. Let's review. Let's review our stages. So our stage 1 is identifying your TEKs. Start there. That's what we start with. You then unpack it, and you examine those release questions if you are in a tested area. And then you determine your essential questions. You go back into the IPG, just grab some questions there that lend to the way that they're going to be tested, that will guide them to this. Can you make up your own questions? By all means, you can make everything up if you want to. But we want to make sure we work smarter, not harder, because the job of a teacher is exhaustive. I'm using that word a lot, but it's because it's applicable. And you want to answer those essential questions. Now, for stage 2, you want to identify the products that could be used to check for understanding and any types of activities, that formative assessments that you plan to use. Identify some real-world application of your concept, and then create a PBL that links the content to the real world. And your stage 3 is your chunks lessons. So you know the beginning of it, you know the ending of it. Now you got to break things apart, scaffold things so that you can build the students up to being able to accomplish that product at the end. The product is not just a test. The product is anything that should, at this point, you should be able to answer these questions right here comprehensively. And then you need to create that daily lesson, the daily lesson frames, because these lesson frames are expected to be posted on your board every day, every day, every day. This lets the students know from the get-go we have stuff to do. We come in here and we work, and it lets any visitor coming in know this is a working class. Okay, so that seems to be a very long training. So what I would do is I'm going to make one more part, and this third part would be the part where we actually create the lesson itself. So until then, thank you very much.